worked with Anna for many, many years, and I'm delighted to see that she has this new role as Managing Director of AbacusBio. Her PhD was done at Lincoln University after doing her BSc at Otago, and she was one of the forefront people looking at genetic engineering. It was a great pleasure then to be part of her supervisory team, to see that she challenged the norm, she asked the right questions, and lo, she has materialised into this business leader, bringing everything, all her skills with her. So Anna, I invite you to the podium. Thank you. Where's it hooked?
Yep, we're away. It's fabulous to be here. I told a few of my colleagues that I was coming to the Deer Industry Conference, and they went, oh. They said to me, you'll meet some characters at the Deer Industry Conference, and I certainly saw last night what they were referring to. And I feel like I've been exposed, if that's the right word, to a corner of New Zealand that I haven't had a lot to do with. And I'm sure last night was certainly a pleasure. Today has been a pleasure. And I'm hoping I will meet many more of you over dinner and over the next few years. So I wanted to talk today about a few themes, but particularly in line with the red meat sector, which is a sector that I actually work in. And when I was thinking about and where we get our inspiration from, I was born into a hugely enthusiastic cricket family. And I've now produced an obsessed cricket family. And I was thinking about, themes for inspiration. And the World Cup for our family was mind-blowing. And I think it was mind-blowing because it's been so damn hard to be a Black Caps fan over the last few years. And it's only 3 years ago that it was said the Black Caps, with their cocky new captain, talked themselves up a storm going into this test match. They got bundled out for 45, then slaughtered inside 3 days. And that was the one quote I could find which didn't have a swear word in it. And I guess the message out of that, for anyone in the red meat sector, for anyone farming, is don't write us off yet when you look at how far they came. And yes, we just lost a test match, but if we look at overall how we've been in the last 3 years, there's been some significant changes within that team. And some of that has been around leadership, but I think more than anything, that significant change has been about understanding why they're there, what they're playing for, and what they want to do together as a group, which if I think about the red meat sector, is what we need to do as well. The man, and I don't know his name, I'm sorry, that spoke earlier about shooting, having a whole bucket full of bullets that he wanted to use on the red meat sector, when I kind of half agreed with him and I laughed like everyone else, but a piece of my heart broke as well. And I'm sure you all felt the same. I hate our sector being spoken about like that. Absolutely hate it. Because for us to have the confidence to invest in our sector, then we need to have confidence in the future of our industry. And if someone wants to shoot half a room full of people, then none of us are going to have the confidence to go forward. We've learned lots today about what's happening in the world, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that because I think it's so important in our farming businesses, in our own businesses, that we know what's going on and we understand where we want to be as an industry. In 1962, Andy Warhol produced this masterpiece, Campbell's soup. And it was a masterpiece because Campbell's soup was considered quintessential American consumer. It was the soup that the American consumers could trust. They could bring home, add hot water, and have a nutritional dinner. Campbell's soup is owned by Kraft with a K, and their sales have been on decline for a number of years. And the reason that they've been on decline for a number of years is because Campbell's soup is not what consumers want anymore. And I learned this from Mary Shellman, a Harvard Agri-business director, a fantastic woman. And she said basically, and we all know this, so it's interesting to hear it, consumers fall into two categories. The premium consumer, the consumer that's buying for the premium products, which we heard Sharon talk about earlier, and the consumer that's buying for value. But what's really interesting is the modern day consumer, and we're all a part of this, is actually both. So I waltz into a supermarket and I'll buy beautiful sheep milk cheese from Blue River, and I might spend a little bit more on that bottle of wine with a cute toggle on the side, but I'll go and buy the cheapest chicken that I possibly can. And if I can get away with it, the cheapest toilet paper. So all within each of us, there's this premium and value sort of proposition. And Campbell's soup, unfortunately, is not really appealing to either the premium buyer or the value buyer. And if you look at, it's really fascinating, I find, looking at supermarket trends and which supermarkets are doing well on a global stage. Aldi and the home brand kind of supermarkets are going great guns. And again, it's because of this wish for value. So consumers go into those types of supermarkets and they trust the value they're going to get in terms of cheap prices, and they know what they're going to get. If we want to hit the luxury market, then there are two types of premium or luxury that we can go after. And one is that luxury caviar type product, which we would love our meat to be. And the other is, premium buyer product the premium buyer is interested in is the sort of ethnic or unusual product. And I believe that meat can actually fit, and meat products, so by meat products I mean offal products as well, can fit into both those categories, which is really, really exciting. And that's craft with a C, not with a K. So what did Campbell's soup do? Initially, they did what they always did, and they went hard and they cut manufacturing costs. They raised the sugar in the Campbell's soup, they raised the salt because they're cheap ingredients, and sales still dropped. They still kept their profit margins, which kept their shareholders happy, but if your sales keep dropping, then that's not sustainable as a business model. And this is what they're doing now. They're desperately going for the craft with a C. They're trying to lift and get into that premium market. Another case, Tesco. Last year, just recently announced a $6.4 billion loss, the biggest loss in their history. And a case, if you read any of the commentators, a case of a company struggling with their identity and being stuck in the middle. They had Aldi come and undercut them, they had M&S and Waitrose above them, and they were stuck in the middle, and consumers didn't really know what they represented. So I guess the moral of that story is that's not where we want our New Zealand products to be, anywhere near the middle. And as a middle child, that hurts to say that, because it's not such a bad place to be. But when we go around the world and we look at red meat, New Zealand red meat products, we are desperately trying to be at the top, and we're not there yet, but we're not at the bottom, so where are we? Unfortunately, we're still there. We have to push harder and harder and harder to get up to the top for all our products, because that's how we survive and that's how we sustain and that's how we return a profit to you guys so that we can keep growing as an industry. So in all this, we know that. We know we need to be at the top. We know we don't want to be in the middle. So what are the big change makers? What's going to change where we are today? And I think there are three. And we have heard about them today, which is really exciting. But the first one is Asia and health. The second one is around this business model change, around using social media and access to consumers. And the third one is us people in the room. Asia and health. I think I've heard people say, well, hang on, this China thing, it's not that big, When I think back even 5 years ago and talking to some of the guys that I work with in Alliance Group, Alliance Group have been in China now for over 15 years. And they said there's going to be a shift into Asian markets. This was only 5 years ago, and it'll come soon. And we all nodded and we all, everyone agreed. We all knew this shift was going to happen. But we sure did not realise that this shift was going to happen to the extent that it has. If anyone had asked us 5 years ago who our major trading partner was within 2 years of that 5-year conversation, I don't think anyone would have actually said China. So to have that shift in such a short time is massive for our industry. And I think because of that, we are playing a bit of catch-up. So we are trying to catch up in understanding those markets, and we are trying to catch up and work out how to get to the premium position in those markets, and we are trying to catch up on a number of levels. But the opportunities are immense, and that fabulous Dear Velvet story that we just heard, I think absolutely highlights where the rest of our products need to go as well. So just to touch on a couple of pieces of work that I've been working on with Alliance in China. So this is a work we did with a number of consumers around understanding lamb quality traits, but also understanding consumer demographics and what they wanted in New Zealand red meat products. For this particular project, we worked with a producer group called Headwaters, and we are trying to develop a healthier lamb proposition. And so we're really trying to understand, well, what are the key taste drivers, and then also what are the key buying drivers around this type of product. And interestingly, and pleasingly, New Zealand Trace to Farm came out as something that consumers wanted, and that wasn't unexpected. There were lots of things that came out of the study, but this was one that excited me most. We know that Chinese consumers want safe foods, but right up there with safe food was this health proposition. And I think this morning's conversation highlights how important this is. And I don't think you ever sit in China and have a meal in China without health and the relationship to food coming up at some sort of level. What we've got to do as a country now is understand the evidence behind our product, the evidence of its healthfulness, so that we can make sure when we are positioning on a health and premium basis that we have the evidence behind that position. This is not new. Let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. This has been around for a long time, and Dr. Chun's presentation before, where he put up the ginseng and the 1600s story, it's stunning hearing that kind of work. But I think the difference that's happening now is when you look at where science and technology is going in terms of genomic research, we have the ability now to sequence a human genome in minutes. My brother leads a laboratory over in Cambridge, at the Sanger Institute, and they have the full genome information of anyone who gets diagnosed with cancer in the UK. Imagine the power of that data set, and imagine how huge it is, and imagine what it means for medicine in the future. So what it really means for medicine in the future is that medicine will become personalised. If we can sequence our genomes and have protein information and so forth, then we can not only personalise our medicine, we can personalise our diets. And for me, this is one of the most exciting future propositions for New Zealand as a food-producing country that could possibly happen. So we need to be doing far more. We had a few questions before going, why have we spent so much money on this research? Where are the results? We need to be spending more money on this kind of research. And the government needs to be spending more money. I understand that people get a bit pissed off if it's their pockets being pulled all the time, and you guys are producers and it's tough. But we've got to say to our government, this is what we need to be spending our money on, because personalised food for medical purposes and for health is the future. Oh, I get pretty passionate about that one, as you can tell. So I'll just jump now to business models. And I think this was alluded to earlier as well. So in Asia now, there is this sort of mantra that we trust friends more than we trust corporates and governments. And that's really interesting, thinking about how we position our products. And just as an example of this, and when the botulism scandal broke out in China, obviously the sales of Care type products plummeted. And then when they started to creep up again, they looked at why they started to creep up again in relationship to government announcements and so forth. What they found was one of the biggest factors which caused the Care products to start increasing again in price, or consumers to start buying them, was not actually government announcements, but was the power of what they call brand ambassadors. And these brand ambassadors are essentially Chinese mums that know everything about products that they feed their babies. And those Chinese mums have a following because they research these products so intensely. So they have a following, and they went back onto these Facebook or Chinese equivalents of Facebooks, and they said it's okay to buy these products, and the products started getting bought again. I think in terms of thinking about how we use social media, and I truly don't understand how we can use it, but this is immense in terms of thinking about how we reach consumers, how we provide evidence for our products, and how we create that momentum to pay a premium price for New Zealand products. And my final one, and our final, I guess, deal breaker, and what changes our industry, is us. It's us in this room. And I've got a picture there of my mum. with one of my sons squashing her. And I've got a picture up there of my mum because she's a farmer herself. In fact, she runs over 4,000 acres. She's actually originally from Gisborne, but she runs over 4,000 acres in the Otago region. And I heard people talking about farmers' wives before, and I'd love to call my dad a farmer's husband when I go home. I like to think of him as a business partner, so I'd like to challenge you to call farmers' wives business partners in the future. But anyway, I digress. The reason I put my mum up there is because about a year ago we had Chinese's second largest beef producer come and visit our offices at AbacusBio. And when they came, because I've been to China a few times, so I sort of felt like I knew how it worked, and I rolled out a lovely morning tea and the big welcomes and so forth. And I talked about how fabulous New Zealand was in agriculture and what a great job AbacusBio was doing in genetics and so forth and so forth. And we had a really lovely morning. And I'd seen on their itinerary that they didn't have a farm visit. So I rang Mum and said, Mum, I'm going to bring 20 Chinese people around to visit you this afternoon. She was pretty thrilled, as you can imagine. But anyway, so I brought these Chinese visitors around to my mum's place, and Chairman Liu got in a Land Cruiser beside my mum, and they had an interpreter, and she bumped him around the farm. And he said to her, why don't you get rid of all those thistles there? They're just away. I can't understand why you've got thistles. And she just looked at him and said, it's because you bloody Chinese don't pay me enough money. And I think most of the trip was pretty much like that. And every time I've been to China since that visit, all that company, everyone in the room, everyone from that company who visited and met my mum, the only thing they want to talk to me about for that first 10 minutes is my mother. And I tell you this because, here's another one. So who uses Tinder? or should I say, who's heard of the Tinder app? You heard of the Tinder app, right? Okay, so the Tinder app doesn't really do anything that we haven't been doing for many, many generations, right? It just allows us to meet people that we might want to mate with, as it were. Anyway, but I think about this because technology is only solving what we fundamentally want it to solve. So I think we get caught up in the technology, but we must remember what actually drives us as human beings. We want to find a loved one. We want to eat beautiful food. We want to share, and we want to connect with people. And those guys connected with my mum, and that's why they talk about my mum and they love that visit. A group of really, really wealthy US tourists travelled all around New Zealand, and they were taken to the most fabulous places. They were taken to the most fabulous restaurants, fed the most beautiful food, taken on helicopter rides, and they were interviewed at the end of it all, and they were asked, what's the best thing, or what's the most significant memory you have of New Zealand? And they said, a bunch of Māori children giving them a pōwhiri. We want connection, we want authenticity. So if I pull all that together and say, how do we make sure that deer industry is on the front foot and stays on the front foot like our Black Caps, despite the test match, I think the key fundamentals are around those three elements. It's around having a shared vision, and I'm really excited about the PGP program. I've read as much as I can about it, and I think what is really exciting is actually seeing our industry on the stage together and cooperating with the Savannah brand. But I think most importantly, and I pick up on that guy wanting to shoot a room full of people, is that for our companies and all of us to get together, we can't actually get together without being honest and really, really candid about some of the problems and some of the issues we're having. And just as an example, I've only taken over as the Managing Director of Abacus in the last 2 months. And one of the first initiatives that I've introduced is a open by default communication policy. And that anyone in our company now can read the minutes of our board meeting. Anything sensitive or confidential gets obviously taken out. We have I will communicate what's happening unless there's a absolutely strong reason not to. And I would challenge those people on the PGP committees, those people, the farm groups that are coming into it, the meat processors, when they want to get into those groups and they want to take this industry forward, that they do the same. They are open, they're honest, they're candid, because that's the only way that we're going to take a shared vision forward and improve the industry. And I think the second one is we absolutely have to be willing to challenge the status quo. especially in business models and reaching out to consumers. And it's really exciting hearing some of the work that's happening on that front. And I think there's a lot of producers in the room, and I think it's absolutely vital that this teamwork happens throughout the value chain. Because if we think about consumers and who they really want to connect with, they don't necessarily trust governments and corporates, right? Who they really want to connect with are the producers. And somehow we have to make that happen. Jack.
Thank you very much, Hannah. We've got a couple of questions, so there you go. So we have a potential for a couple of questions for Anna before we swap over. So I'm wondering if there's any clarifications or expansions that you would like. Not about Tinder, please. Save that for after dinner. Do you have any daughters?
Yeah,
What?
yeah.
Now, AbacusBio was started by Peter Fennessy.
Yes, it was. Who many of you will know. And he was one of the ones that warned me about the characters.
Right, I can imagine that. And we saw him on a younger version last night. What was his goal?
It's really interesting. He credits the deer industry with making him. He's a mega scientist, Pete Fennessy. He's got a brain like blows your head in terms of what he thinks in terms of future of science and the memory and what he retains. But what he credits the deer industry was actually helping him to think more commercially and to be able to pull the stuff out of his head and apply it. And I think that's because the deer industry, when he was involved in those early days, was highly entrepreneurial, as it is now. And I think that's a reflection of the people in the room. And when you're in the startup kind of zone, if you're not practical, you're sunk, right? And so I think, he said that's what gave him the commercial nous that he's got now and which he's now sharing with us as a business.
And you've got it.
Hey, first of all, great presentation. I really enjoyed it. Thank you. I wish a lot more people listened to your message. I really, really enjoyed it. Hey, I'd like to really ask you the question that you finished off with asking us. What are your thoughts on what the deer industry could do, or us as deer farmers, to better connect with our customers? Do you have any ideas, innovations that we could potentially take up?
I really like the health story, and I know that it's been worked on very hard on the velvet front. When I look at venison itself, it's a beautiful iron product. It's a stunning product in terms of health package. I would really, really like to pick up, I guess, to drive that health message forward, and even looking at things like products like deer blood. What else can we do on that front? And I think that's around lifting the value and lifting our ambition for the industry. And I guess around, thinking about ourselves as an industry, I was struck a few years ago when I went to a conference and there were sheep and beef representatives and deer representatives, and there were dairy representatives as well. And the dairy representatives, they just looked cocky. They walked with a swagger, they presented well, and the other industries kind of looked a bit apologetic. And I think as an industry, we've got to stop apologising, and we've got to have more confidence, and we have got to stop talking about shooting a room full of people. We've actually got to start making it happen. Oh, sorry.
Yes.
This is a really interesting topic, because I would actually really like, and this is the sort of generation thing, I think, because I would really like farmers to be on social media and connecting with consumers. But most people in the room will go, say they put the wrong thing up, what would that mean for our industry? And here I might spin it around and say, I'm in my 40s, right? Social media is relatively new to me. My kids, it's just attached to them. And we in our 40s are horrified at the thought of farmers interacting with consumers. But the ones coming through now, the kids coming through now, they will be doing it whether we like it or not. But I'd take it back to one of Sharon's points earlier, it's can we somehow target that and make sure there is some sort of aligned message that is celebrating New Zealand, is celebrating the way we do things, and is celebrating people like my mum, because that's what people want to connect with. It's not just our products. They want to connect with the fact that, I'm sending my kids off to school today, or I'm going to go and do the lamb run, or I'm going to get the deer out of paddock X. It's the little things they want to connect with. It's not always the things that we think they want to connect with.
Grant, are you following up on that, or was it the same
No, I was just, I was pretty sure I knew what Hamish was looking
Right.
for.
And I
So
didn't
we
quite
need
deliver.
to come back to the social
Yeah.
media thing.
And maybe Alana is a better
And
person to speak on
Alana's
it.
going to now, assuming we've got the okay. Thank you very
Great.
much, Anna. We'll
Great.
be talking to you more in the evening session.